Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Advancing Education, Alberta's #1 student leader podcast, where we talk about student issues, news, conduct interviews, and all other kinds of stuff like that. You're listening to the Leaders Series, where we interview current student leaders of ASEC and the future leaders in our province. I'm your host, Dalton Erie. Let's jump in. All right. Welcome to episode 3 of ASEC's Leaders Series podcast. We are pleased to be joined today by Kaedee Fythe. Faith, and Jonathan Bilodeau.
You said that right, so good job.
Thanks. Yeah. I spell it wrong all the time, so. How are you two doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, doing good. Good. It's good to hear. How about you introduce yourself first, because you weren't with us last time, and then we'll get into Kaedee.
Sure. So I'm the man usually behind the scenes here on the podcast. My name's Jonathan Bilodeau. I'm the executive director of ASEC, and just a pleasure to be here and to chat with you today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Kaedee, and as you may know, I'm Kaedee Fythe. I am the NAITSA president for like a year, and yeah, it's a pleasure to be sitting down with two lovely men that are passionate about students like me. So, yeah.
Nice.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. What do you like to do in your free time, like other than being at NAIT all the time?
Oh, what a great question. I like to hang out with my musical instruments because I also play a guitar or violin, whichever is which. Also love to read books on my own. Probably, like, if it's a nice day, I would go for a hike in my neighborhood. We do have a few trails in the ravine and the creek. And yeah, I also like to just sleep or like nothing.
Is that a hobby, sleeping?
I would say, yeah.
How long have you been playing instruments for?
Well, I started when I was like, I would say when I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, oh my goodness, you will know my age. I would say like 15 years, 17
Nice.
years.
Okay, cool.
Roughly, give or take.
Yeah. Yeah, so. But exposed early.
What instrument you play? Just guitar?
Guitar, mainly guitar, violin. And I learned like other instruments as well, like the drums a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I also started with the piano because that's the basic, like that's where we learn the basics of it. And we just derive to other instruments because we read like musical notes. And we learn it to the piano first and then derive it to other instruments like guitar and violin. So, yeah.
Nice.
Cool. So you said you go to NAIT. What made you choose to go there?
Well, I really like applied, something applied, like something, even though theory is great, right? Something we can think of, something that is well studied, but I like the hands-on learning. And I've been looking for that for almost my entire high school years, like discerning which school to go for, like college. And so I was choosing in between schools, and I think of NAIT as a great option especially for business, because business is so abstract and business is so like a lot of creativity behind it, and a lot of things that we can go for like business. So I'd like to have a hands-on learning, applied research kind of approach where we're not just sticking about the theory, but having the applied component of it. So that's what made me choose NAIT.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. NAIT's a good school. I went to NAIT.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
What part of business are you in?
Well, I started off as like in a finance program, but now I've switched to human resource.
Okay.
So I still have like both of them. Like I earned my education from both programs. So.
Sweet.
Did you change because you were going into student leadership, or did you change because your interests changed?
Oh, very good question. Because originally I wanted to pursue accounting.
Boring.
I would say it's fun because it's like different for different people. Maybe because I had a prof before NAIT, because I went to a university before NAIT.
Okay.
I have the most passionate professor in accounting. And then as soon as I arrived at NAIT, I fell in love with finance. I'm like, wow, I like the economics and the finance component aside from accounting, because I have a stereotype for myself that, accounting is more for introverted people, but extroverted. So
What?
isn't it obvious?
Really?
Oh,
I didn't know. Did you know? I didn't know.
Wait, what are you shocked about?
well, I'm very curious about
Kaedee's
John's.
an extrovert?
Oh, right.
Well, I'm curious about John's program. Hello, program of finance. But yeah, I think I just got interested about the human resource side of things because, like, balance of profitability, because that's what finance can see. Like, there's a future, right? Finance can see the future. But with human resources, like, the balance of valuing the people behind creating the value of those valuations with finance and economics. So I get the balance of perspective about that. So
Nice.
not really a huge change, but just integrating that.
Just like a more rounded understanding of what business actually can be. It's not just numbers, it's the people on the other side as well.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a threat. It's a veiled attack against me.
So we'll see you next time on Advancing Education. When you were choosing schools, did you ever think of going to any different ones in Alberta?
Well, I did hope that there's a school for the arts, like specializing in music. I did hope for that, but I haven't found anything because, I think if there's a school that is majoring in performing arts and music, I would go for that. But it's NAITSA stood out to me so far.
Nice.
And
Nice.
yeah.
AU Arts doesn't have any musical stuff there. Do you know?
Oh, don't make me change my mind.
They have like theater and stuff, but I don't know if they have like a dedicated music program. Don't quote me on that. 'Cause they might, but
I'm about to find out.
I know like U of A does and U of C does. Like you can do a BFA in music.
Oh.
Yeah, I've seen master's program in U of A about music. And I'm like, this is calling my name.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
It'd be fun for sure. It'd be an interesting program.
Oh, yeah.
So what made you want to be a student leader in the first place? Like, why did you decide to run for student leadership?
So I am also exposed to a lot of things when I was in like young age. I think I was exposed to sports, music, and then student leadership. So at 7 years old, I was also exposed to student representation. And that opened my eyes that, wow, there's a lot of things that a student leader can do. But of course, it was limited because it was too early, like grade school, right? And as soon as I escalate my educational attainment, that's where I see the value of representing students and being a voice for students, being an advocate for students. So I think what made me run for this year, which I earned the position with the trust of the student body, is that there's so much I can do for students and that I think I can provide value for students if I represent them. So I did have perspectives as a senator at NAITSA, and then the following year was NAIT Board of Governors. So I have the overlooking site. Now I wanted to be on the floor for like the executive or the execution of those strategies, which representation is the best place for it. And so, I have a pretty diverse perspectives of interacting with students, not just international or domestic, but really diverse. So it would be meaningful for me to do that for them for a year or two.
Were you scared when you ran? Was it nerve-wracking? Were you anxious?
It is, of course, because there were three of us. And I do believe that each of us have certain strengths, and we have the like almost the same intentions of running, and it's up to the student body. It's not going to be me that would be deciding to really represent students, right? Because the student body has to choose. Of course, it is nerve-wracking. It's like, what's going to happen? Because it's going to change my life, because the spotlight is so bright when it comes to student leadership and student representation. And that itself is nerve-wracking, right? And especially with the age today, it's social media age where people can creep on social media and look it up onto whoever it is, because it's a public interest who is on the student council or something. So,
well, no, I'm glad you ran. It's good.
Well, I'm glad I'm here.
So basically what I'm hearing is that you were like, this is like your lifelong goal, basically. From 7 years old, you've always wanted to be the president of NAITSA.
I would say not specifically NAITSA, but somehow similar. Like, yeah, the preparation has been like, small like milestones. And I learned a lot, and it's a continuous learning. And I think the very goal of also in student leadership for me is the growth, because I could not get this experience anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And like the opportunity to also learn from others and not necessarily thinking that I'm more than others in this position, because it's a privilege. Yeah.
It's a role of service, so that's good attitude.
Okay, so let's start talking about NAIT a bit here, NAITSA, and your plans for the upcoming future of the year. First things first, I think orientation. This is going to be the first in-person orientation in 2 years. What are some of the challenges you guys are facing, and how have you pulled together to overcome them?
So, for the planning for the in-person orientation, I think that we have the best people to be on that job. So NAITSA has our campus life director and our events manager, which are actually former student execs at NAITSA. They were VP internal during their years. So it's pretty exciting. We did pull out, it's challenging, but we did pull out some plans. We collaborated with Institute, and we reimagined how it was like before, like back in 3-5 years. And that's the challenge there. Like, we're facing a 2-year pause of that orientation, right? Because we just did it online. So lots of preparation. And I think the challenge might be like gathering the volunteers. And the amount of volunteers this time is higher than usual. So yeah, it's getting the word out there for student would be challenging. But of course, it does take time for other students to volunteer. Right, so I think everything is getting together, I would say, and yeah, it's pretty exciting that we're actually having this orientation by the end of August.
Nice. Any big names booked? You have like like Daredevil. Is there gonna be a fireworks show? Like what should the students expect when they come to orientation?
Well, one thing they need to expect for the orientation is that they have all the support they need. There will be many booths from health and dental, from well-being, from student services center, NAITSA events team. Everything is going to be there. We haven't invited any celebrities or any fireworks display. Because we have to have that approved with our risk management team, right? So nothing crazy yet for like orientation or something like a foam party. No, we don't have it like that. But there are pretty exciting like interactions for that.
Well, so for next year, just a few little ideas.
I'll get our campus life director for that.
John apparently has Daredevil on speed dial, so
I got a guy.
What day is your orientation going to be?
August 30th and 31st.
It's coming up pretty quick here.
Pretty quick.
Is there anything you're like nervous about at all? Maybe something the students should maybe be expecting, or you're expecting students to do and they might not be as keen to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the expectation that they might be keen to do it is the level of engagement that we want. Especially how it sticks to them that this is their day, this is their opportunity to ask questions. They might be reluctant because they weren't used to interactions like huge crowd of people, because 2 years has been rough and has been challenging for them to do that level of interaction. But yeah, other than that, I'm pretty confident with the team, what we have put up for them, for the students, and it's just exciting overall. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So moving past orientation, you got a whole year after that. What are some of the goals your team is working on this year?
So I would say because we have set our individual goals and we also have set our team goal. But the highlights of each of our portfolios, so for example, for our VP academic in our team, she wants to increase the numbers of tutors that are in the trades program, right? For our VP external, he would like to focus on getting the the vote, like getting out the vote campaign for the provincial election to induce motivation for students to pledge and get out the vote, right? Even though we're nonpartisan, but we can still encourage students to exercise their rights for the vote. So that's pretty exciting. For our VP internal, she would like to focus on like the EDI, on the events, the procedures and languages, so that the minority group can feel welcome in all capacities. And for myself, I would like to stick with the very role of representation, meaningful representation, to actively collaborate with the Institute, that a student first mission and values is at the forefront of policies, procedures, and services. And it's doable. And we're very excited to collaborate and smash those goals for the year.
Yeah, those are really great goals.
Yeah.
I like your VP Externals goal especially. I'm a little biased, working here. But I like what you said. We're not partisan,
yes.
right? But encouraging students to vote and young people to vote is how we actually impact change.
Exactly.
It's really, really important. So those are good goals. I like that.
Absolutely. Me too. I'm very happy that I have this team, and I'm very excited. And at the same time, I'm so lucky that I belong to this team, very talented and very passionate in each of our portfolios, and we work so well together. So we just can't wait to, be visible and be a familiar face for students with this orientation on the upcoming events. So pretty exciting just overall.
Well, I like that your goal personally aligns with ASEC's number one priority eventually, which is meaningful consultation.
Right.
Maybe not number one, number three.
Number three, yeah.
Number three. Yep. Sorry, they're all up there.
They're all number one.
They're all number one. No, but that's really good, and I think it's something that's really important, especially in the Alberta context. We don't have a lot of those same protections like other students' associations would in other provinces. So I really applaud you for that goal. It's going to be a bit of an uphill fight, but good work to do.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year. Yeah.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it on our end as well. We did start doing some lobby team meetings the other day, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to approach that goal on our end ourselves. So if you want to get on that conversation, you're more than welcome to sign up for the lobby team.
We'll see.
So with your goals in mind, what are some of the projects you guys have started working on?
Oh, so projects. I love it. We started working on our classroom visits, because that's part of our goal as a team to, because we aspire to reconnect to the student body, right? And that way, in classroom visits, we wanted to engage with staff and students so they get to know us better. So we already have planned for swags, what it would be like, how long or what soundbite do we want to be for students. So yeah, we're already getting the role, and we're gonna do it for fall and winter.
Nice.
So yeah, it's very exciting, and we call it like the Orientation Express. And we are inspired by the travel and like a sort of like a train track.
Yeah.
Probably the LRT of Edmonton.
Hopefully functioning.
Yeah, you can aim higher than
Like there's a stop shop, like, oh, this station is actually NAITSA. This is a service hub, that's the concept. It's like taking them to a journey of travel, that there's a tour for you about NAITSA. So yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Hopefully like rolling into classrooms with like a smoke machine and like Jody with a little conductor's hat on, I think would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, actually we planned for what we're gonna wear for it, so it's gonna be fun and nothing too crazy, but at least something interesting for students to remember.
Nice. Any other projects going on?
So far for now, we focus on those priorities, and to be honest, we're gonna retain also our study party, and that's in our VP Academics portfolio, where we connect students to their respective tutors that they need for their academic preparations for their exams.
Nice.
And other events, that we have lots of events, like hundreds of them. So
Yeah. Always exciting.
Yeah.
What's the one you're most looking forward to?
Ooh, I'm looking forward to I think the Leadership Summit, which is happening August 26th.
In a couple days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in a couple days.
Still, I'm sure that our invite is in the mail. We're just still waiting for it to arrive.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm gonna check that out. I wasn't assigned for the invites, but yeah, I'll check that out. Because I think that was a baby project by the executive council team at NAITSA last year,
Right.
which is 2021, and this is the second year for that, and we have created really great engagement with students, especially we introduce leadership at NAITSA. So yeah, we funnel them, but if they're interested, to replenish our seats for the next year.
Nice.
Is that what that is, the Leadership Summit? It's like trying to recruit more students, or what is it?
The very core of it is to, because most of the students we invited are already having, like, for example, international peer mentors are invited, or campus activities board members are invited, and other like academic council representatives. And like those students are already having roles in the community. We're just there to strengthen them.
Oh,
And if
okay.
they want to pursue further, they are very welcome to explore what opportunities they have. And lots of good stuff. Like we invited speakers. And there's free swag, of course. And if they need mentorship to anyone in the room, they're also free to do so. And networking. Yeah.
Cool. It's interesting. It's an interesting tactic to try to get students in, and kind of, instead of just telling them to volunteer and trying to be a part of it, like actually giving them some substance and something to think about and something to learn from. Hopefully it works out good for you.
Yeah, it worked so well last year. And we hope to have more uptakes or intakes this time around. We'll see. But I have invited lots of my peers, and they're pretty receptive about it, especially they're approaching the last year of their program. So yeah, they're trying to maximize whatever they can, and it's better off that a first year student would benefit from this type of event. So
Very
yeah.
cool. Well, again, I really am excited to be invited.
We'll find a seat for you, John.
Just way in the back.
Like
So what has been your biggest challenge so far this summer?
That's such a good question. My biggest challenge so far is because I'm also a student, and I'm also working full-time as NAITSA president, right? So the biggest challenge was to sacrifice my own interest as a student by just having less courses, because my goal this year personally is to make quality decisions and quality work, of not burning out. So that's the biggest challenge for me, because I would usually take a lot of load on myself in a course of a week, like no breaks. But it's a challenge to say to myself, be kind to yourself, because you have a big role. A lot of over 15,000 students are counting on the decisions we make as a team. And my job is the team for EC at NAITSA. So this is the biggest challenge, to reflect that, okay, I'm going to slow down with my courses. I'm just going to take one course per semester. Even though it's going to take me longer to be at NAIT, taking me longer to graduate, and I'm also impacted with the curriculum changes. So that's another challenge to reflect. But other than that, the challenge was the sacrifice, what to choose and what not to choose. So
I think that's really wise, though. When I was in your same role, I took 3 courses a semester, and yeah, burnout is a real thing, and you're not getting anything out of those courses. You're doing the bare minimum to just kind of scrape by. And I certainly was not a great student during that time. So I think that's really smart, very wise to slow it down and focus on this time, because it's so brief. You only have a few months. Like, really, you're elected for a year. You're already done 5 months of that.
Exactly.
So you only have 7 months to go. And school is just starting right now, basically, right? So
yeah, and that's what I learned. Like, I try to learn from the past student execs, and I get to learn from you as well, that you took the full course load of 3 courses. Not gonna lie, I did lots of planning about my courses. What if I go aggressive, like full-time at school, full-time job, or conservative, like 2 courses and then full-time job? or very conservative. So I took like a financial investment approach that what if we go aggressive, balanced, or conservative. I did that a lot of planning that way. But yeah, I discerned what's best for myself, that it's okay to be conservative about what time load, especially I will also disclose that I did have post-viral fatigue from COVID, and I cannot extend my capacity for my brain anymore because I get fatigued like right away. Like 8 hours, 10 hours, my brain is drained. So I have to keep myself accountable because no one is going to be taking over for me, right? I got to do me. So in that way, I'm taking care of myself, and I'm taking care of the student council, because my well-being will be very important when it comes to decision making.
Sure. Students are so much smarter than when we were student leaders.
Yeah, I pretty much just slammed my face into a wall for 5 years straight.
That was my general strategy.
Yeah.
To student leadership.
I can't. I get to value well-being the hard way, because I burned out before the finals.
Right.
And nobody's going to save me from that. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is not good if I continue this.
Yeah.
It can be a habit. So when I go to the workplace, I might be doing it again, burning out and doing those habits that doesn't serve me. So I got to correct it before I graduate.
What is that? There's a quote from Parks and Rec, I think, where he says you can't half-ass two things. You got to whole-ass one thing.
Full-ass one.
Is that what it is?
I think that is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a personal challenge, correct?
It is.
What about any team challenges you've ran into?
Our team challenge, because this year is in person. Like, we're back in person. We're back functional team in person, back in our offices. And that's a challenge, because even though I would say our predecessors from the past year has set the bar high for us, because they endured going back in person, back online, back in person, back online, right? Whereas for us this year, we do have the hybrid option, right, of like working from home. We just need to let our teammates know. However, most of our events are back on, like, in person. So we need to trace back what it was like 3 to 5 years ago. Right? We need to reimagine how it's like. So that's the biggest challenge, because the nature of our job as NAITSA Executive Council members is to set the strategic directions of where NAITSA is going, but we just can't discredit or ignore or fully give credit to the past 2 years.
Right.
So we need to track back and circle back and then reflect, like, okay, which direction do we want NAITSA to be? Because we set that directions. So, and we oversight the operations. So that's the biggest team challenge so far. And we are little by little overcoming it, of course, because it's not going to be like solved overnight. Right. But yeah, we adapted these certain changes. And I think the summer also offered us to be back in person with conferences, which we need to learn from other execs in 2017, 2018, or where that time was full on, like, in person. So yeah, those are the very challenges.
Yeah, COVID was weird.
It is. It is. Yeah, that's where it's like we need to reflect. What do we do?
Yeah.
So we're going to start talking about ASEC here. We're starting to do some research for this year's advocacy document. What would you say is the most important goal for us to focus on this summer? That we chose at goals this year, obviously. If you forget them, it's tuition, consultation, work integrated learning.
There you go.
Yeah. For the most important advocacy that I think that we must focus on is the meaningful consultation. I do think that students, while we are so diverse, we are in different backgrounds and different programs, So we do need to be meaningfully consulted in a way that we're not just there to get their approval, if that makes sense. Like we're not just there to provide the approval, or we're not just there as just a part to comply with the legislation. Because I think it's important to know how it's done compared to just how it looks. Because how it looks, it would be like students are being consulted. But I think if there's a framework or the guidelines, what are the expectations and how consultation is done, or how consultation must be done, it would be a great of value for SAs or student associations to have that advocated for the government. Especially we have the onuses of approving certain things, like for example, M&IFs or tuition. Even though we really cannot approve a tuition, but the legislation would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, the legislation would say that the student association has to be consulted at least twice in a year. But how does that look like? Is there any progression, or are there any expectation, or is it an analog or monologue or a dialogue? So the specifics are very important when it comes to meaningful consultation. And I think it's the most important advocacy to make it louder for Alberta students.
Well, and what's really important to get into people's minds is that students aren't just a customer of the institutions. Right?
Exactly.
And so I think there's that thought that's out there that, well, you're just a customer of the institution. If you don't like it, you can just go to a different institution, or you can go choose to do something else. But really, I think that's very short-sighted. I think we can see, at least in the Canadian setting, that post-secondary is kind of the great divide. It's the great equalizer. You know, we have over 50% of our population has some kind of post-secondary credential. And so in the labor market, that becomes a very, very competitive thing that you'd have to have. And so really, if we aren't making post-secondary accessible for our students, what we're doing is we're preventing people from progressing in our society and moving up and really fulfilling their dreams and living the life that they want to. And this all comes back to meaningful consultation, because once the institutions and the government and our Alberta society really understands that students need to be at the heart of these consultations, need to be partners on campus, need to be involved intrinsically in how these decisions are rolling out on campus. Once that happens, our system becomes so much better, and our province becomes so much better, and our students become so much better. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick comment about how the system is designed. It's designed for students. It's designed for institutes. It's designed for the common public interest. That, just for example, if I have my kids, how are they being valued? How is their voice being valued? We're a major stakeholder. Students are a major stakeholders, and we're essential to the economic state of the province, or to even internationally, like to the whole world. Like, we are globally competitive, or shall we say, we are actually the ones driving the economic force for labor, or for professionalism, and of course wisdom, because we're sending ourselves to gain knowledge and wisdom and how to do things right in the industries that we serve, either be it in business or agriculture, whatever that is, right? So we believe that students provide absolute value in the society. Therefore, we see that there's also absolute value in being meaningfully consulted. That's why that advocacy piece is very, very important.
And it's becoming more and more important as the government changes the funding formulas in our institutions. Now, in our publicly funded system, public funding is actually, for the first time ever, has gone below 50% in our system. So the government is funding less than half of the operations of our institutions, which means that more burden is being placed on students and on tuition dollars, and we're becoming a bigger and bigger proportion of the funding puzzle. And so I think that gives us a legitimate reason to be included in these decisions. I mean, we are, apart from the government, we are the largest funder of the advanced education sector in Alberta. So really, we're the students are the people going to these institutions, getting the education. So there is that, they are consuming a lot of the services being provided, but also they're the product that is coming out of these institutions. It's going to be alumni. They're going to build a reputation. Like you said, they're going to really impact a lot of these industries and sectors. So really, our society has to be focused towards the students. The students' voice has to be the primary voice on campus, for sure.
Exactly. And because it could be tied into certain things, like bigger things about meaningful consultation, especially the Alberta 2030 strategy was released last year in 2021, and also the fact about deconsolidation. Am I saying it right? Yep. Yeah, and the red tape reductions. So there are lots of onuses on the institute and the students to decide what is good for students and what is good for the institute. Because it goes both ways, because the resources are limited, and it's a basic economic principle. Therefore, we need to allot our capital expenditures or funding or whatever resources we may have to certain things that brings us to a certain direction. Right. Because it will determine what it's going to be like in 2030 or whatever that is.
Well, and you brought up deconsolidation, and this is really why meaningful consultation is so important right now. Deconsolidation is a very complex accounting topic, but basically the institutions are no longer going to be presented on the government of Alberta's books, on their financial statements. And the big change that had to happen for the deconsolidation piece to happen is that the government of Alberta had to give up their ability to appoint the majority of people on the boards, and had to give up their ability to appoint the chair of the board for institutions. So what has happened is the public interest at the governance level of our institutions has actually been reduced quite a lot, quite significantly. And I don't think a lot of people actually understand that change and what that means. But what it means is you're going to have more industry folks and more insiders and more people who are closer to the administration of the institution on those boards. And so you're not going to have that public interest. You're not going to have as much accountability and transparency. And so this is the reason why students need to be, their place on campus needs to be strengthened and empowered, because we've actually lost a lot of accountability and public interest on campus, and we need to regain that piece.
Exactly. And I think it's fair to also not really account for certain financial things, but account for the fact that as soon as I found out that there are certain changes about the modernization of the governance structure about institutes, I spent the last summer learning about it, about the strategy, and because I was starting my term as Board of Governors at NAIT as a student at large representative in September 2021. And the term is for a year, and therefore I always bring up the question, do we feel sustainable about a certain budget for the fact that we are to deconsolidate it at our own, capacity as an institute, or what it is like, because it's so complex and it's so fresh still, but it's also fair for us to learn early what it's like to be in the next years, if this is what it's like right now, because of the fact that deconsolidation affects a lot of certain areas of the institute, and the onus for student associations to discern. And not every student associations have the capacity, equal capacity to really approach certain things like this. So, and that's why I think being heard to the government, that meaningful consultation will provide bridges to certain gaps of the system that were not being set aside, because there's a lot of decision making, to be honest, with that change of system.
Cool. So, we went off on a tangent.
That's perfect. I love it, actually. The one thing I would like to ask of you two is what, just off the top of your heads, what is the ideal consultation situation look like for you guys?
After you.
So I think, and this is not so far the best, but it's just on top of my head, that there has to be a similar approach about how the contract law is like, that there's a there's an offer, there's a consideration, and there's acceptance, right? That it's not just a one way that, oh, we're informing you that we're doing this, but it's like an offer that we are to do this. What do you think? Or like there's still consideration, and there has to be a sufficient amount of time where SAs can discern and can think, let's say 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever that is, we name it, like a reasonable amount of time to consider that, okay, if the institute is to do this, we have that time to think, look at different angles, look at different directions, consider risks and how to mitigate them, and go back. Is this the best option? Are there other alternatives? Like approaching it like a business case, saying during that consideration, and then we go back and, okay, this is what we think. It's not like being rushed. Mm-hmm. I don't think consultations have to be rushed, because it impacts the students in the future, and that impact is not even rushed. It's like long term, and in order for us to make quality decisions, consultations have to follow like that certain thing, just as how doctors diagnose their patients, or lawyers uncover, like the truth behind things, or how accountants analyze transactions. So if we can derive a similar principle to consultations, that there's an offer, there's an consideration, and there's acceptance, or whatever that acceptance look like, or like a feedback, I do think it's going to be meaningful in that sense, because that's how we are able to derive the value of taking the time, mm-hmm. taking our thoughts, mm-hmm. looking at different angles and how it will impact students. Because, for example, at NAIT, we have a very diverse group of students. We cannot say, oh, this will just impact a certain group of students positively. But how about other people? How about the other groups? That's why it's better off to take the time and discern, is this good for the community? So I think that approach of the contract law would be a somehow
good place to start.
Yeah, good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that, definitely. So in my mind, it kind of breaks into three separate categories. And so the first category is around process, and that's exactly mm-hmm. what you're talking about. Yeah. Right now, the process is very undefined. There's a rule in the regulation that says there has to be a process, mm-hmm. and that's as far as it goes. That's as much as the regulation says, is that the institution and the SA have to have a process to consult and meet with each other. But that's as far, it's completely left undefined beyond that. So that's something that we need to work on for sure.
Yeah. And I'm not quite sure how, first, let's say, a regulation will be changed and how they will define it further, because maybe they are providing flexibility on different student associations and institute according to their size.
Sure.
Right? But it's just that I think the common ground has to be like the principles mm-hmm. and expectations, like what core values are like has to be present during that consultation. Yeah. Like objectivity, impartiality, or we name it, right?
Yeah, obviously consulting in good faith, and that includes all those different kind of values and pieces in there, right? But definitely some sort of process, and I think that includes some minimums mm-hmm. around, there, like you said, there has to be an offer, there has to be some kind of presentation of information, mm-hmm. there has to be enough appropriate time for consideration mm-hmm. of that information, and then there has to be an opportunity to give a response. Yeah. In this issue, very similar to like what you said in contract law, right? So that procedurally needs to be worked on, and I think that's a great kind of first step.
Yeah.
The second piece that we really need, though, is definitions, specifically about what can be included in a fee structure, mm-hmm. what is an appropriate interpretation of the law, like, really getting some definitions and some clarity around the very nitpicky kind of specifics, because, as they say, the devil's in the details, and when we work on these kind of issues and files, that's where all the disagreements happen, and that's where a lot of the resentment starts to build up. You have institutions that put entire departments, HR, budget line items in a mandatory non-instructional fee, and it's like, well, not all those people are working on this fee, and not all of them spend their entire job working on this fee, so is it appropriate to include all those expenses? And then obviously having access to the information and documents
Yeah.
that you need, right? And,
Yeah.
and so a lot of the times the student associations just have to take it on the word of the institution that these numbers are real. There's no way to verify this information. There's no way to make sure that they're accurate. There's no way to kind of audit that information.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last piece, of course, is the student association itself needs protections because the playing field is not level. It's not even, right? The institutions hold all the information. They own the buildings. They have all the money. So we as the student movement are at a significant disadvantage when it comes to any negotiation or consultation. And so there needs to be some kind of regulated or more formal protections for students associations, which exist in other provinces, by the way. This is not a novel idea. This is pretty common stuff. Just in the Alberta context, it doesn't exist yet. And so those three kind of components, in my mind, is what builds a meaningful consultation. Because if you're missing any of those three, then you can't meaningfully consult.
Yeah.
By definition, you just can't have a negotiation or a consultation in
Yeah.
good faith without those three components.
Absolutely. And that's why I find, like, I'm grateful I get to learn accounting and then finance and human resource. And it all comes together. And I know I might not be the top student for these classes. It's just that the wisdom behind it is that accounting taught me that there's the nit-gritty details that can change the whole transaction, the whole books, or the whole value of what's in the numbers. With finance, it's like the future, like projections, right? And human resources, the people behind it.
Right.
And that's why it's a fair lens to say that, yeah, the details matters, and especially the accounting of things. And I think there might be, and I think it's in the framework, that there are limitations on how student associations can gain access to, like, as a respect to the books of the Institute for Private Information Access. So, and I think there has to be a definition on how that fine line is like.
Right.
Like, to what extent can we ask for further disclosures, or to what extent can we know about compliance documents? Are they compliant with their practices, or were they able to disclose it according to public interest? Right. So there are lots of things that I'm very interested to see that are they being compliant, or not just with one institute. It's for every institute, because it's a public interest.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better. It's for the public interest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. That was great. That was great to listen to. Your guys' top of your heads is a lot deeper than mine, so that was pretty good. I do have another question about the goals that we selected at Olds. Did any of the ones that your institution, NAITSA, wanted to select, weren't selected?
Wow.
That was terrible.
That was the most awkward way to ask.
That was so that was off the top of my head, so you can see how well that went.
Were there any priorities you wish had been selected?
Yes, that is the question.
To be honest, and I'm very surprised with the priority selection we had, that it also aligns to what we are aspiring for, especially, for example, like tuition, because that's when we strike while the iron is hot.
Yep.
Because we know about the regulation and the legislation. We need a modifier for that for 2023 onwards.
Yep.
And that's also one of the most motivators I have, that who is there to actually give that lens that there has to be an advocacy piece, right? And that's also a very nerdy motivation that I would disclose. I think with, for example, a meaningful consultation, that's also really aligned to what we wish for. Not really a wish, but we hope for to happen. Because we don't have a standardized model on how consultation looks like. So also with the work integrated learning, because from what I'm hearing from students, they're very interested about what it would be like for them, that they have paid or unpaid, or like industry focused, or like what it's like to have work integrated learning. And I think that's the low key selling point with polytechnics like NAIT, because we're close to the industry. And it's attractive for international students because that's what they are here for as well. Like they would like to see their opportunities after their graduate. It's not just about how they started with NAIT or with any institutions, but they would like how they will have a meaningful career also after they get out of their programs, right? So, but I think there are certain things like that we would like to advocate for, and I think it's an ongoing advocacy with ASEC in the past years, as far as I can see with the priorities about the support for OERs, and it's something that an institutional advocacy that we can do at NAITSA, because it's challenging for institutes to have a level of acceptance for OERs. But so far, so good. I do not think there's any priorities that are not aligned with what our goals are for advocacy.
Killed it.
Killed
Knocked
it.
it out of the park.
Did a pretty good job. We actually, after the time of this recording, we will have a announcement about OERs we've been working on with a group of librarians and the University of Calgary Students' Union and Open Education Alberta on a big province-wide campaign where we're going to have some table drops, students out front of libraries, students out front of bookstores, kind of trying to really push that idea of OERs and get that into the minds of students. And once it's in the minds of students, then they can start talking to their instructors, and the instructors can start kind of wrapping their heads around it, and we can just keep moving up those levels. That'll be announced here pretty soon.
Yeah, sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Yes,
Yeah.
more fun things coming from ASEC. So at Goals, we did talk about more than just our provincial advocacy. We touched about federal as well, which is a new avenue that ASEC is going after. We selected 3 goals for this year: international student retention and attraction, Canadian student financial assistance, and Indigenous student support. Which of these 3 is NAITSA and yourself most passionate about?
To be honest, we do have a very diverse population at NAIT. We just cannot point that it's more international student or more domestic students. It's a mix, accounting also for apprenticeship students, for trade students, right? All 3 of these are equally important to us, and that's how I can say that that's how we meaningfully represent our student body, that we're not just giving out a voice for a certain group. However, in alignment with the Alberta 2030 strategy, as I can see that the province has ambitious numbers of how many international students they wish to attract and the goal, and I cannot fully discredit that ambition. It's because our population is shrinking, our birth rates are down, cost of living is actually going up. Inflation, interest rates, we name it. There are economic factors that drives behavior for the local population to grow. Therefore, immigration is one of the things that keeps our population growing through foreign workers or labor market impact assessments or international students. Mm-hmm. So with that, I think we discern that these are equally important. However, for like international student retention and attraction, that's something that is a work in progress, especially like the affordability of their cost of living here. And same is true with domestic students as well, like the amount of support and access to support financially, the facilities, and overall well-being for students. So I think these are the things that NAITSA is equally passionate about for these federal asks. Indigenous student support, that's another needle that needs to keep moving, so that we are making an inclusive space with those federal asks, even though those are like higher ups that we need to ask for. But it does have an impact. We don't choose a favorite on which support groups to support, but that's how we continue to be equitable and recognizing that the diversity is a strength. So yeah, I think those are really great federal asks.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was like, which one is my favorite? And I was like, I don't think I can pick a favorite of those three. All three are just so important.
Yeah.
All three just need to happen. It's like, no one of those three is more important than the other. Like, all of them just need to happen. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I never really realized that it is the asks are about like specific groups of people. I never really realized that until you started explaining it how you did, and it's just like, yeah, of course they're all important. They're all important to post-secondary.
Yeah.
What do you think ASEC needs to do to like accomplish these goals then? Like,
what do we need to do?
I think because the value proposition of ASEC in the first place is lobbying to the government. And I think as we choose to stay in that focus, I think that's where the very work that ASEC is going to do for the student members, the student association members of ASEC. And I think research, and I think there's a model of operational in the back end of ASEC that is working well, that is effectively working well. And I think we can just continue to do what we are doing that is serving the organization and the student organizations that ASEC represents to the government. And yeah, that focus will propel us to be heard and to influence what's out there. And again, to represent Alberta students, because students need to be heard, and it's through ASEC. And I think that's the voice we need for ASEC to do, is to be a megaphone in behalf of NAITSA and behalf of other student associations. So yeah, that's the focus that I think that needs to be done.
Nice. And that is what we do. We try to bring a spotlight and emphasis to these kinds of things. And for anyone who's out there listening, just know there's no magic pill to public relations or government relations or policy work. It's just work. It's just doing the work every day, putting in the work, making sure that you're talking to the right people, making sure you have your messaging on point, and just saying it over and over and over again to everyone. So.
Yeah, and I think the credibility of ASEC is a work in progress, even though there might be, advocacy work that has been done efficiently or effectively. And it's same is true with like people and other organizations as well, that credibility is a work in progress. Credibility in the sense that we have resources that we need to do the work that we need to do. And yeah, I think strengthening or building a strong foundation even further, how to up our game as a student lobbying group in Alberta. I think that's also propelling us to do the meaningful work that needs to be done and needs to be heard. Yeah.
So I just have one more question for you, and it is kind of out of left field. I think this one fell to the bottom of my page by accident. But I just want to talk about our conferences this summer. You were one of the few people who were able to come to both, and I'm just curious, like, what your biggest takeaway was from them, and kind of your summary, I guess.
Ooh, conferences. I love conferences. And that's the number one. That's my huge takeaway. I get to learn about myself, that in conferences, I get to expand my social skills. And it has been 2 years that I didn't have that much social interactions in groups. My huge takeaway, I think I can dial it down to the top three because number one, I signed up for the experience to represent NAITSA in the first place, and it's within our executive directorship agreement that one of the expectations as student exec is to go to conferences. And my takeaway about it is that, wow, it does add value that there are student execs or student leaders across Alberta that can relate to the amount of work that we do, because it's never an easy job to represent students with a diverse population, to have many angles of student representation. My top number two, that's not top number one, that's top three. On top number two, sorry about that.
Starting to sound like me.
I think of the experience of, I think it reinforces the experience as a new student to a new place, to a new culture, or to a new environment, to a new purpose. And I was able to put myself in a student's shoe that, okay, what it's like to start fresh in life, pursuing a program in the post-secondary. Because I was able to stay in the student residence in Olds and in Red Deer, and I was like, wow, it's very humbling. It's very, it's like an immersion for me. Like, oh, okay, what it's like when you wanted to achieve something, but in a different place, that there's a huge change in life just for one thing to fulfill that purpose. Because our conferences have different purposes, like leadership and goals. So it affirms me as a student that, yeah, it's a ride. To be honest, I get to meet new people. I get to learn new stuff. Some things come up, some things are surprising, some things are tempting, or some things are not new to me. Maybe because I was able to attend conferences before HASAC, so I'm not new to the logistics of it, but I'm new to the experience that, wow, there are people that weren't able to experience what I experienced, or they were able to share their experiences with me that I get to learn. That's top number 2. And I guess the top number 1 is that how ASAC is able to provide this opportunity for networking and learning and growth, that there might be student association challenges in our own essays that other essays might have the answer or might be able to give us insights, what they have done and how it's going well, and then we can adapt those strategies and try it in our own essays. So some things like that. And yeah, it's a very nice environment to be in with those conferences. And it's promising because we are representing Alberta students, and it's over 100,000 students in these groups that are passionate about people. And it's nice to meet passionate people. I think that's top number 1.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to have you, and you were great at the conferences, and I'm glad that you got value out of it. And yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad, and it's a pleasure to be of value to conferences as well. Cheers for more.
Yeah, that is everything I have for you. Do you have any questions for us that you want to kind of maybe clear up, or happy to just leave it there?
Well, I do think, when is this going to be broadcast on the radio? I'm just kidding.
End of the month, yeah. Thanks again to our guest, and thank you for tuning in. If you like this interview and want to learn more about ASAC, check us out at albertastudents.ca or follow us on social media at Alberta Students on all major platforms. Until next time, this is Advancing Education.